All right, so here is the deal, the real deal, the unvarnished truth. And does anyone say unvarnished anymore? I think I need to stop reading books and getting smarter. Anyway, here's what I wanted to say. Doing research for all of the clubs for some of these leagues around the world is exhausting. But with La Liga starting up this weekend, I was like, F it, let's do another preview. However, this time around, I'm gonna do it a little bit different just to keep it fresh for you and for me. So it's gonna be my bottom three, my top four, my Europa League qualifiers, and a few players to watch. And we're gonna start with who I think is gonna get relegated. And first up is Espanol. And yes, I'm going with a relatively notable club to get relegated this season, and I'm sorry that I have to do it, but since they share the city of Barcelona with FC Barcelona, nobody really knows they exist anyway. And yes, I'm sorry. That was pretty harsh. But let's look at the stats. Last season, they scored 36 goals in 38 games, 16 of which were scored by Gerard Moreno, and because of his success, they sold him to Villarreal for 20 million euros, and they didn't really replace him with someone of his caliber. And to make matters worse, their starting goalkeeper, who was statistically one of the better goalkeepers in all of La Liga last season, left on a free transfer to Real Betis. So I think they're f***ed. I really do, and that bums me out because it would be very cool to see this team just be good in general. And my next club to get relegated is Huesca, which sounds more like a refreshing drink on a summer day at the beach than a recently promoted club from Spain's second division that will be playing in La Liga for the first time ever. But it is. And they earned this automatic promotion by finishing in second last season in the Segunda Division, 1 point behind the league champion Rayo Vallecano, and it was mainly due to their stingy defense, which was the third best out of the 22 teams. Unfortunately, though, they've lost their star goalkeeper Alex Romero, who only gave up 38 goals in 40 games last season, which is pretty impressive, since his loan from Athletic Bilbao ended, and obviously, Bilbao now need a goalkeeper after they sold their starter to Chelsea. So this hurts Huesca's chances to maintain their defensive prowess. As does the fact that their stingy defense was playing against second division talent last season, and so I just think this step will be too big for them to compete over 38 games. So enjoy your one season at the top, fellas, and try to switch jerseys with Messi while you can. And now for the last club I have going down, it's Valladolid, who is another one of the newly promoted clubs. But get this, they barely got into the promotion playoff last season despite having scored more goals than any of the other 22 teams in the Segunda Division. And that's because they had the fifth worst defense. I mean, they are awful at defending before, of course, they finally figured it out through their two-legged playoff affairs to earn their promotion. Unfortunately, they lost the man who scored 33 of their 69 league goals, Jaime Mata, which easily earned him the Golden Boot as the top scorer in the league, on a free transfer to Getafe, and they didn't replace him. So peace out, Valladolid. With no one on your team with the ability to bail out your defense every game, you got no chance. And now let's talk about the three teams that are going to make the Europa League. Now, for a frame of reference, last season it was Villarreal, Real Betis, and Sevilla. And this season, I think it's going to be Valencia, who despite finishing only 3 points behind Real Madrid on the table, which earned them qualification to the Champions League, I just think playing in Europe is going to be what kills them in the league this season, because I don't know if they have the depth to compete in multiple competitions. And I say this knowing that they signed Jeffrey Kondogbia from Inter and my favorite player in career mode, Kevin Gamero. Go on, Gamero! While also getting Michy Batshuayi and World Cup hero Denis Cheryshev on loan. And honestly, I love all of these moves because these guys, coupled with Santi Mina up top, who I feel is on the verge of a real breakout year this season, proves that they got some options and that they're going to go for it, and I love it when teams go for it. I just don't know, though, if it'll be enough to be successful in both competitions. However, if they get bounced from the Champions League in the group stages and can focus everything that they have on the league in the second half of the season, then I think they'll get fourth again. But if they get into the knockout rounds, I think they'll be spread too thin and get fifth. And then I have Villarreal, who, despite winning the double against their big rivals Valencia last season, they also finished one incredibly valuable spot and 12 points behind them in the table. So that has to hurt a bit since Valencia got into the Champions League while the Yellow Submarine finished in fifth and had to settle for the Europa League. But I like their signings this summer. They picked up club legend Santi Cazorla for free from Arsenal, and they got the best player on a bad team, Gerard Moreno, who scored 16 goals for Espanol last season. And they took a flyer on two players who could use a change of scenery in Ramiro Funes Mori, who comes over from Everton, and Mexican international Miguel Leun from Porto. But it feels like overall, Villarreal are hoping to be better this season because they're hoping guys live up to their potential as to actually just being better because the players they brought in are already super good and are living up to that potential, if that makes any sense. So I think they're going to have a similar finish to last season. And then finally, there's Sevilla, who, despite qualifying for the Europa League by finishing in 7th last season, beating Atletico Madrid to become Copa del Rey finalists, and getting into the Champions League quarterfinals after beating Manchester United in the round of 16, they went through 3 proper managers and an interim one over 9 months, and they finished behind their rivals Real Betis in the table. So I mean, talk about a weird and dysfunctional yet kind of successful season. And now here they go again, starting a new season with a new manager, but this time with a lot of new and promising faces in the team and a few familiar and important names out, like Steven Nzonzi, who left to go to Roma. So I just feel like they are still mired in transition, and that's because they're still in search of some stability. And for me, until they find that, this is where they're going to be in the table, just outside the top 4. And speaking of the top 4, we're going to get to them next after I talk about my 5 players to watch this season. And first, it's Jaime Mata, who I mentioned before, because he absolutely dominated the Segunda Division last season, scoring 33 goals. So I'm very excited to see how he does with Getafe this season, especially since he's 29, and this is the first time in his career that he's played in La Liga, which is super cool, and I think he's going to be up for it, so keep an eye on him. As well as Rodri, who at the tender age of 22 ran the show for Villarreal last season, and if you think I'm kidding, he created more passes for a worse team than Sergio Busquets did for Barcelona last year when they won the league title. And now that he's made the move to Atletico Madrid to take over for Gavi in midfield, who left to go to Qatar to make that cheddar, Rodri will be surrounded by even more talent, so look for him to continue his upward trajectory. And staying in Madrid, let's talk about Real's Vinicius Jr., who I had the benefit of seeing during their preseason tour of the US this summer, and the 18-year-old can play. I can vouch for him, and so can his fellow Brazilian teammate Marcelo, who called him the present and future of Real Madrid, which is high praise, so we'll see if the teenager can back it up. And speaking of young players with lots of potential, let's talk about Barcelona's Ousmane Dembele, because even before his unbelievable game-winning goal with his weak foot in the Spanish Super Cup last week, this season was going to be an important one for him as he proved that he could hold his own in the starting 11 of one of the best clubs in the world, especially after they're signing players that might potentially replace him, like Malcolm from Bordeaux, while also validating why they paid so much for him. So far so good, but there's still a lot of season to go, so we'll see how he handles the pressure and expectations. And finally, I want to talk about a former young player who had a lot of potential but didn't really reach it at a young age. Denis Cheryshev, who looks to have had rejuvenated his career in the World Cup with Russia. And now with his move from Villarreal to Valencia, the 27-year-old will be looking to make the peak years of his career matter, and you can sense his urgency, so I wish him the best. But enough about the players, let's get to the top 4, starting with who is getting in 4th, which I believe will be Real Betis. Or I thought it was going to be Real Betis, because I'm a big fan of their manager who just goes for it going forward. But the problem with going for it is that it makes you vulnerable in the back. And after I looked at the cold, hard stats, they gave up 61 goals in 38 games last season, which was as many as the last place team Malaga gave up last season, and obviously they got relegated. So it's just unacceptable, and I don't think they did enough in the summer to shore things up in the back, though I do love their signing of defensive midfielder William Carvalho from Sporting Clube de Portugal. He's got an epic mustache. I love his mustache. And I think he's going to help, but he's not going to help enough to get 4th. So I don't know what I was smoking. I think Valencia locks up 4th for sure. And now in 3rd, this is where it gets tricky for me, because though each of the obvious top 3 in Spain did some business in the transfer window, only one of them stood out for not doing enough. And for me, that's another one of the best clubs in the world, Real Madrid. And sure, they brought in Vinicius Jr., who I believe will be a star, but being a star means being consistently good game in and game out. And due to his age and the changing of leagues and living in a new country, I just don't think he's at that level yet, but I do believe that he'll get there. And they brought in the best goalkeeper of the World Cup, Thibaut Courtois, who they didn't even need, let's be honest, because they already have a stud in goal, in my humble opinion, who's already won them countless trophies, and his name is Keylor Navas. So I believe they should have spent that money elsewhere, maybe on Courtois' teammate Eden Hazard. Also, they brought in a new manager in Julian Lopetegui, which, as I've said in all my previews so far, with any new manager, it takes time to implement new ideas, no matter how talented the players are on the team. So I think they could slow them down a bit to start, but as a quick aside, and I only bring this up because it's something I've been thinking about more and more as the season approaches, why did former manager Zinedine Zidane really leave his position? Why would one of the best and smartest midfielders to ever play the game step away when things were going so well? Because this man, who had many gifts of course, but one of my favorites is his ability to see 10 steps ahead, which was one of the many reasons he was so special as a player. So if he could sense that shit was going to hit the fan with the club, and if he knew it was time to jump ship, then I fear that this could be a very long and difficult season for Los Blancos, especially if Luka Modric gets his wish and follows Cristiano Ronaldo to Italy. Then Madrid are really in trouble and will definitely finish in third. Right now, I'm like 75% sure they'll get third because I got Atleti finishing in second, and here's why. They got Antoine Griezmann to stay, which is huge. They got Diego Costa settled and coming off a summer of being fully back with the club, which was very important as well. They got captain Diego Godin signed to a long-term contract, which obviously is important too. They picked up Rodri, who will start immediately and make an immediate impact in midfield, and he was the best young player in La Liga for me last season. And they signed Thomas Lemar for 70 million euros from Monaco, which is a huge signing and finally gives them some speed out on the wings, along with Gelson Martins, who came over for free from Sporting, which will make the team more dynamic and thus harder to defend, which will hopefully lead to more goals because last season, Barcelona scored 99, Madrid scored 93, and Atleti scored 58. 58! Even 12th and 13th place finishers Real Sociedad and Celta Vigo scored more last season. However, with that being said, Atleti did have the best defense in the league, only giving up 22 goals in 38 games, which is a joke. That is so insanely good. So I guess it's all relative, but if they're going to really challenge for the title this season with Barcelona, which I think they can, then they're going to have to hit the back of the net a whole lot more. And speaking of Barcelona, as much as they're going to miss this guy, I miss him a ton. I believe they're going to be the champions for the second straight season, and not only because Real Madrid seems to be less threatening without Ronaldo in their team, and Atleti still may be a big signing away from being legit contenders to unseat them at the top, but because Barca made moves to be even better this season. They got some grit, leadership, and a winner in Arturo Vidal. They stole highly touted Brazilian winger Malcolm out from underneath Roma's nose after Roma thought they had it all locked up, and they added two players that I think will do very well for them this season as spot starters and in the future as their core players. And I'm talking about Arthur, the 21-year-old Brazilian from Grêmio, who is so good. I really enjoy his game and who will only get better being around all the talent in Barcelona's team. And 23-year-old center back Clément Lenglet from Sevilla, who Barcelona feels so strongly about, they let Colombian World Cup hero center back Jerry Mina go to Everton for a pretty low price, all things considered. Plus, their core longtime guys, I'm talking Messi, Busquets, and Piqué, have to be able to smell the blood in the water that Real Madrid isn't as strong this season, and that Atleti will be tough as always, but not unbeatable, and that this is probably their best chance to win another treble before age catches up to them. And also, I'm not saying that they are going to win the treble, but given the pieces that they've added and the fact that their rivals maybe aren't as strong as they normally are, and if they can stay healthy, it's going to be hard to bet against them since, again, their core players, which includes one of the best to ever play, have to know it could be now or never. Also, here's the part where the comments start coming in to stop writing Barcelona's you're such a Barcelona lover, blah, which is when I respond with, every time I count Real Madrid out, they win a trophy, so pipe down, Madridistas. Me not picking you to win has always been a good thing. Also, despite your possible claims to the contrary, I've always been quietly neutral in La Liga, even though I'll admit to having a soft spot for Atleti. So these predictions of mine are just calling it like I see it. And okay, I think that's it. So thank you for watching and subscribing and for liking. Let me know if you like this new format of my league predictions or if you prefer the breakdown of each individual team, and I'll see you tomorrow. Later.